Okay, now that you've seen what cross contours are and you've had a chance to practice adding cross contours to three-dimensional forms, let's take a look at how we use them in our actual artwork. Now, cross contours can help you with your artwork in many ways. For example, they can help you add texture to your drawings. They can help you add patterns to your drawings. And they can help with changing your values or your shading to your drawings. And by using cross contours, you can actually do your texture, your patterns, and your shading in a three-dimensional way.
So to demonstrate this, I'm going to do a simple little drawing of a wishing well. I'm going to start off by drawing the cylinder. I'm going to leave the bottom open for now. I'm going to go ahead and establish the thickness of the top. Now I'm going to use cross contours to add my three-dimensional guidelines, just like when we did the cylinder in our practice. Once my guidelines have been established, I can use those guidelines to add in the brick patterns. Notice how the bricks follow the curves of the cross contour lines. I'm staggering the bricks to make it look more realistic, but each band or each row of bricks is curving and is going around the cylinder. Notice the top is different. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to continue this pattern until the whole face of the wishing well is done. So as you can see here, the bricks look like they're going around the wishing well. They're not going straight across. For the top part, we have to make them look flatter, just like we did on our practice. So these lines are going to go at an angle and they're going to be straight rather than curved. And what I've done is I pointed the angle towards the center. For the bricks that would fall inside of the cylinder or inside of the wishing well, then you have to curve those lines as well. So what I did here was one, I drew the cylinder. Two, I used cross contours to put in my three-dimensional guidelines. And three, I used my guidelines to draw in my brick pattern. Cross contours can also be used to do your shading or to create your value changes. So I'm going to be showing you that on this drawing as well. First thing I want to do is establish where the light's going to come from. I'm going to do a small diagram on the right so that you can actually see what I'm going to be doing to the wishing well. So I'm using my cross contours just like I did on the wishing well. And I've established the same light sources I'm going to be using on the wishing well. Now, as the light hits the inside of the wishing well, you'll notice that the shadow is actually going to be on the inside left because that's a wall that is opposite of the light. But when we get to the main body or the outer part of the cylinder, the wishing well, it's actually going to be the opposite. So the light source would be closer to the left, and as it wraps around the wishing well, it's going to get darker. So the right side will be the darker side, and the left side will be the lighter side. The light source, the way that or the light is, the highlight is actually not going to be on the far left edge. It's going to be a little bit inside of that. Now I'm going to use my cross contour lines for shading as well. When I do the shading, I'm following the curves established by my cross contour lines. You can start to see now that the highlight is actually not on the far left, but actually just a little bit inside of that. I like to start in with a midtone, leaving a hot spot for my highlight, and then gradually build up my shadows. Before I actually begin doing the shading on the wishing well, I'm going to go ahead and darken up the lines just a little bit, especially where the shadows are going to be. Otherwise, I may lose some of the bricks. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow the same um, idea as I did on my little diagram, using my cross contour lines to help. So I'm going to go ahead and do the top first. Now I know the top, the light's not going to bend around, so the light is going inside of the wishing well and it's creating a highlight on the right side and a shadow on the left side, just like in the diagram.
Okay, I went ahead and sped this up a little bit because the process is virtually the same as the little diagram. So on the left side, that's where my hotspot's going to be. But as I go to the right, I'm going to let the values get a little bit darker. Starting with a midtone, blocking it in first, and I'm following my cross contour lines to kind of bend the shadow. Once my first layer is done, I'm going to begin adding my second layer and blending it into the first layer, keeping the right side just a little bit darker than the left. The closer I go to the light source, the lighter it has to get. The further away from the light source, the darker it's going to get. Here I'm adding the third layer, again getting a little bit darker and fading it into the second layer. And I'm also darkening the edges of the bricks a little bit because some of them are starting to get lost in the shadows. I'm also darkening the mortar lines between the bricks. The mortar typically is a little bit darker than the bricks, so they'll show up a little bit stronger. As the mortar goes to the left, however, it does have to get a little bit lighter because it's getting closer and closer to the light. For the top, I'm going to leave that relatively light. I'm just going to go ahead and darken up the mortar just a little bit, but the top is actually catching a lot of the light, so it's going to be relatively light. A little bit of grass to suggest that the old well is sitting on the ground somewhere, and we're pretty much done with this little demo. So to recap, cross contours are used as three-dimensional guidelines to help us add textures, value changes, and patterns to whatever object it is that we're drawing. So as you can see up here, first thing I did was drew the cylinder. Then I added my cross contour guidelines. I then followed those guidelines when I was drawing my brick pattern. And then I also followed those guidelines when I was adding my value changes. And that's how this simple little cylinder was transformed into an old style water well or wishing well.